Hey guys, it's Selwen here. Today let's finish off with the Warlock changes and talk about Affliction. This one is quite fresh, all this new stuff just came out on this week's build, so expect in the coming weeks some of this to change, but you can get an idea of what Affliction is gonna play out in BFA. Now this week changes are actually really amazing. It doesn't seem you're gonna be as powerful as in Legion, and like our Lord and Savior Eon or Watcher put it, no king rules forever. But that's not to say that Affliction isn't fun. Oh no. I personally disliked Afflict in Legion, just thought of it as really boring, just dotting or multi-dotting and chain drain souls, but this new version, even I was having fun. So let's take a look at the spellbook here and see what's changed. If you're wondering artifact stuff, that's all gone, okay? Artifact ability, Soul Flame, all of that gone completely, but that's fine, you get some new toys to play with and some improvements. So Agony, all the same except for the new effect, still is your main dot that ramps up to 10 and has a chance to give you a soul shard as it ticks. As for your resources, they stayed, you have 5 soul shards and all of that, but like the other 2 specs of Warlock, mana is no longer part of your gameplay, so no more life tap nonsense, all about soul shards now, thank you for that. All these things the same also. Corruption once again the same, your other dots. Like Agony, you get a new sweet effect with it. And then here on the second page is where you start getting some new things, but especially on the talents, but we'll get there. So Summon Dark Lair, I know this was a last year talent for demo, but now is a cooldown for Affliction, in the same vein as the Infernal in Destruction. And it's quite an interesting pet summon, and I just love what Blizzard did here with the locks, just still keeping that fantasy of having pets, but they turned them into badass cooldowns for each specific spec, which is just awesome. So what it does is, it summons the Dark Lair from the Twisting Nether that extends the duration of all of your damaging overtime effects on all enemies by 8 seconds. If that's not awesome enough, the Dark Lair will also serve you for 20 seconds blasting the target for some damage, increased by 10% for every dot you have active on any target, costing 1 soul shard on a 3-minute cooldown. So it's a pet cooldown that helps extend your dots, and yes, it works on your Unsable Afflictions, but it also benefits highly from just having multiple dots up on any target, making your multi-dotting cheesing fest boosted highly, which is cool. So interesting thought process there. For you to take to make the most out of it in different situations, like stockpiling Unsable Afflictions and just preparing for this big Dark Lair. And then here, Seed of Corruption, your main AoE is still all the same, with a new cool effect as well. As for your main pets, they stayed all the same. You no longer have the Grimoire of Supremacy, so no more having the Doomguard or the Infernal all the time. You just get the Dark Lair now. So in BFA, you're gonna have to choose between your pets like in the old days, your Imp for damage, a Self-Dispel, and a Stamina buff. Fell Hunter for an Interrupt and a Purge, Voidwalker for tanking, and Succubus for CC. Now Shadowbolt, yep, it is back, and I know a lot of you are happy to see this back, and myself included, highly requested, and is now your main filler, replacing Drain Soul that you have in Legion, although it returns as a talent, but more on that in a bit. But yeah, you get your Shadowbolt back. It really doesn't do anything, it's just something for you to be clicking when nothing else to do. You do get a new cool effect and talents that boosts it, but again, more on that in a bit. Shadow Fury is here now, and it's baseline like all the Warlock specs, which is really cool as well. Your defensive and Unstable Affliction. Now Unstable Affliction still works mostly the same, costs the 1 soul shard, deals high damage in a short amount of time, you can have up to 5 active, but you deal 10% increased damage on targets afflicted by it. So the Contagion talent from Legion is now baseline, baked into the unstable affliction itself, which is also really cool to see, and it refunds one soul shard if the target dies while afflicted. So this is basically to help out in dungeons, so Mythic Plus, so you don't get so resource starved from going from trash pack to trash pack. And yeah, that's it. Your mastery still is the same as in your Soul Leech. Now for talents, as you can see, you have quite a few new things, and there's a decent synergy here with some pretty interesting choices. So first row, you get Shadow Embrace. Your Shadow Bolt applies Shadow Embrace, which is an old school Affliction lock debuff, if some of you can remember that, increasing your damage dealt to the target by 3% for 10 seconds, stacking 3 times. Nothing too special, having this up it's gonna be pretty easy, so not much to it. Haunt, kinda is the same thing as the Shadow Embrace, but you get it as an active ability, but is on a short cast dealing damage, slightly more than a Shadow Bolt, and applying a debuff increasing all damage dealt to the target by 10% for 15 seconds with a cooldown of 15 seconds also. Now the problem with this is that it's basically the same as Shadow Embrace, just a damage increase, you just get an 1% extra, and that you need to use on cooldown, right, to keep it up. Since the duration and the cooldown are the same, there's always gonna be a few seconds that you're not gonna have it up, plus having it to cast it, there's always gonna be a few seconds that you're not gonna have it up, and with a dot class that is really bad, and having to cast it and all of that might make you too cluttered while managing your dots and simple afflictions and your cooldowns and all of that. So I don't think this is a time to make Haunt shine again, sadly it just seems a little bit too clunky to use it. Deathbolt is the more interesting of this tier, an instant cast ability on a 30-second cooldown, dealing 30% of the total remaining damage of your damage over time effects. So basically, if you have Agony, Corruption and Unstable Afflictions up and they are at a pretty decent timer, and then you use this ability, it's gonna give this pretty big hit. It's a quite bursty type of spell, but also opens all these new gameplay decisions, like potentially saving up on Unstable Afflictions to use right before it becomes available for a big Death Bolt, while only keeping one active for that contagion-like effects, kinda like you did in Legion. It also synergizes with your Dark Glare cooldown, which also benefits from having multiple dots up, and since it increases the timer of all of your dots, it also gonna increase the damage of the Death Bolt. Then you would also want things like Siphon Life in the next tier and etc, where you can just have absurd number of dots all focused towards Dark Glare and Death Bolt. You basically see where this is going, right? It's quite a fun talent and my favorite here on this tier. That said, it does seem quite powerful right now, so might get nerfed. You know, for someone that doesn't really like dot playing specs, Affliction looks quite appealing right now, and I'm sure some of you can relate. Second tier Wraith in Agony, same as in Legion, making your Agony more powerful, ramping up 5 more times, and nothing to see here, probably it's gonna be pretty good when having multiple targets. Absolute Corruption, also the same, increasing the corruption damage by 15% and making it permanent, the most boring of them all, something to make your repetition easier, I guess, or multi-dotting. Siphon Life is now down in this tier. It's another dot and heals you for 30% of the damage done. This is obviously an amazing combo here with Death Bolt and even with Dark Glare, like I said previously. So it's by far the most interesting talent in this tier, solely based on how it synergizes with your other abilities and talents. Next, all the same, your Burning Rushes, Demon Skin, etc. Next is your AoE ones. So the Seeds still is here to make your Seed of Corruption more powerful, planting 3 seeds in total, the go-to for cleaving or sustain AoE kind of thing, or Mythic Plus. Phantom Singularity is still here also, the more bursty approach, placing above one target, damaging for 14 seconds and healing you for 25% of the damage done. Again, very good for bursty AoE damage, or even for a single target if it still works there. And Vile Taint, which is a new talent, an AoE dot of all things. It costs a soul shard and has a small cast time, so it takes a toll on you more than the other choices that don't really affect your rotation too much, but places a vile pool under your target, dealing damage all around for 10 seconds. Pretty high damage, I might add, and also reduces movement speed by 30%. I bet you wanted this while doing the mage challenge, right? This seems to be the go-to for Mythic Plus. Clearly, I mean, you have high damage, CC on a pretty short cooldown, so it's a win-win. It does count as a dot, so can potentially make a Death Bolt bigger and benefit Dark Lair, but in single target you would want to use that Soul Shard for Unstable Afflictions, hence the cost, so you cannot really use that ability in single target, or could potentially be a little bit too powerful, but pretty nice to see. The cooldown is short enough to make it perfect for every dungeon trash pack. It sticks to the target, kinda like Phantom Celerity, so it's great all around. Combine this with the new Unstable Afflictions refund, and you're just gonna Valtaint and multi-dot with Unstable Afflictions pretty much, and no longer with seeds, you know, you just want to use seeds to apply corruption if you're not using the Soded Seeds, for obvious reasons. Next you got your utility, Dark Fury taking place of your Shadow Fury, reducing the cooldown by 15 seconds, and your Mortal Coil and your Teleport, same as always. Following tier, Nightfall makes a return from the glory days. Corruption damage has a chance to cause your Shadow Bolt to be instant cast and deal 25% increased damage. So it is what you expect, it procs quite frequently, great to keep up with that Shadow Embrace buff if you so need, and you rarely gonna hardcast Shadow Bolts at this point. And I mean, what else is there to say about it? It's a proc, it's fun, people love it, and I loved seeing it back in Affliction. If it's going to be great or viable, we shall see, because we got Drain Soul in this tier as well. So Drain Soul replaces your Shadow Bolt as your filler, so essentially it's giving you a choice between the Legion sort of playstyle or the old school Shadow Bolt one. Now Drain Soul is also improved. It deals decent damage, but also gets its damage increased doubled, in fact, on targets below 20% of HP, plus it generates a Soul Shard if the target dies during its channel. So for Mythic Plus, this is going to be great. Like, you practically have to have it just to get a lot of Soul Shards when going from trash pack to trash pack, fueling you more Unstable Afflictions or Seeds or even Vile Taints. And that damage increase also seems quite appealing for raid bosses or just bosses in general. It also just plays better, at least in my opinion. It's more boring, yes, but when you put things like Death Bolt and the setup required, or you know, your Dark Lair, you can just stop Drain Soul at any time and you might still get some damage in. With Shadow Bolts, yes, you do get the instant casts, but you do get more cluttered, specifically again when setting things up. So I do feel Drain Soul is easier and more powerful, but we shall see in live. Hopefully they will be even in numbers, just depending on how you play, so you can choose purely on what you prefer. Grimoire of Sacrifice is still here to get rid of your pets, but between these last two choices, why would you take it, right? Final tier, Soul Conduit is still here on the Soul Shard refunds. It does what it does, nothing to see. Creeping Death is a new one, making Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life and Unstable Affliction deal their full damage 50% faster. So it's kinda giving you 50% haste, and I would imagine this would be the go-to for Mythic Plus, right? Just to make the dots deal damage faster, or any multi-dotting situation to make the most out of that improvement. Nothing changes gameplay-wise, the timers are all the same. Now, Dark Soul Misery sort of does change a little bit of your gameplay. If you watch my Destro preview, you remember that you got a talent called Dark Soul, increasing your crit chance, which now changed to Dark Soul Instability or something like that. On here, increases your haste, 30% for 20 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. Infuses your soul with the misery of fallen foes. How edgy is that? And is basically a Bloodlust. Amazing just to combo with your Dark Lair, Death Bolt, Siphon Life, and you're just gonna use this to set up really crazy openers. The cooldown does not align with Dark Lair, sadly. Like in Destro, the Dark Soul doesn't really align with the Infernal, But yeah, pretty straightforward. That haste is just gonna make your dots tick faster, your dark layer to attack faster, your Unsable Afflictions are gonna be on a pretty hefty timer due to the dark layer, so that haste is just gonna stay there for a pretty hefty time. And then you're just gonna send that Death Bolt, dealing a lot of damage. And since your dots were increasing duration, you can just focus on Drain Souls or Shadow Bolts and just do them really quickly. And yeah, it is quite fun. So all in all, pretty amazing changes to Affliction as well. It looks far more fun than what we had in Legion, at least in my opinion. Yes, we did lose our artifacts, but between Dark Lair, Death Bolts, Dark Soul, it really makes up for it. The only bad part, I guess, is that the only real choice that you seem to get is choosing between Shadow Bolt as a filler or Drain Soul. And maybe, if one is not clearly more powerful than the other on live. The rest just seems specifically built to deal with specific situations like in Legion, so expect changing talents around quite regularly, and the others just seem like a no-brainer, like Siphon Life. You really want that to boost your Dark Lair even further and your Death Bolt. So guys, do let me know in the comments down below what you all think of the new Affliction Warlock. Overall, I think Warlock is looking amazing in BFI throughout all the specs. One of my favorites so far for sure. So yeah, like and subscribe and hit that bell icon for more videos like this. Have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya!